What's up everyone? So today we got a video that I've been wanting to make for a while now, which is the tier list for the Kid Cudi projects. We've already done this for Logic and J. Cole's whole discography, and today we'll be taking a look at Kid Cudi. Now, Cudi is someone who I've been getting really back into over the past couple of weeks, and that is why I'm so excited to really, go through his whole discography, which I'll again and rank them. We have tiers from S, A, B, C all the way to D, so not as many different tiers as we had in the past videos, but these are still, those are five categories that we can put the albums into and rank them in, and I think that'll be enough. So I guess we'll just start off with like we did with the other ones, where we just kind of pick which projects I would say are the weakest, and then kind of like take them as like a benchmark and then go from there. So for Cudi, I'm gonna have to say that, of course, if you look at it down here, if we go through his whole discography, it was first mixtape, A Kid Named Cudi. We have his first album, Man on the Moon, and then we have Man on the Moon 2, The Legend of Mr. Rager. Then we have Indica. Then after that was Satellite. Was it Satellite Flight: The Journey to Mother Moon? That's the title. After that came Speeding Bullet to Heaven, then Passion, Pain, and Demon Slaying, and then, well, Kitsy Ghost and Wizard are his collaborative projects, of course, with Dr. Genius and Kanye, respectively. So those happened. Wizard was in 2012, and Kitsy Ghost is the latest one, which was 2018, which was part of like the Kanye release run of that year. So yeah. We'll just start off by saying Speeding Bullet to Heaven is definitely the worst Cudi project, just because it was so unstructured and raw. It was, at the time, was trying to go all like, it was like really like a rock, grunge, punk type of phase, and he wanted to channel that into his music. And I've seen him defend this album just because it's been taken apart by so many critics since it released. I've seen him defend it by saying, at the time that was just what I was feeling, and I just wanted to scream at the time, and this is what the album that resulted in that. But I think I think Cudi thought of himself as a bigger artist than he actually was. At that time, he wasn't as relevant as he was, for example, back in 2010, where he could have dropped a project like this and it would have gotten more attention, because this was, to my knowledge, this is also his worst selling project, which is, of course, related to the fact that many of his fans and many critics in general dislike it so much. For me personally, I'm also a fan of Cudi's traditional sound, which was, of course, pioneered by his first mixtape, and then Man on the Moon, The Legend of, or not The Legend of, but rather The End of Day. That is the title. I was just missing that. I know it's a Man on the Moon, but then The End of Day is his first one, and then The Legend of Mr. Rager, the second one. So yeah, that is why I didn't like this album, because it didn't follow in the same footsteps as a lot of his early work did. I have to commend Cudi, though, for always trying something new and always experimenting, even with as big of a platform as he has. Some artists wouldn't have, the balls to do that, just because they have fans that anticipate certain stuff from them, and they expect, they have expectations that the artist has to meet, but Cudi never really cared about that. So that is also why of course, Cudi is one of my favorite artists of all time. Going from here, I think we can start with like one of like the best. Of course, The End of Day, the first Man on the Moon, is by many considered their favorite Cudi project, so it's definitely going to end up somewhere up here. I can already tell you that The Legend of Mr. Rager is my favorite Cudi project, so that's why I would put it up there. But of course, as I also said in the last videos, this is kind of a mixture between my favorite Cudi projects ranked, but also I can look at them in his discography and discuss their importance that they played in his career, and that's also a factor that goes into it. So definitely The Legend of Mr. Rager, the second Man on the Moon, is my favorite Cudi project. I think just the development he made from the first Man on the Moon, where it was more, he was singing and expressing his emotions, which of course at the time no hip hop artist, no male hip hop artist, breaking two stereotypes at once, had done on this scale before. So the first Man on the Moon is, of course, a huge centerpiece in his career, and many fans and critics think that he hasn't topped it to this day, because it just the sound he pioneered on it was so different. And I think the second Man on the Moon takes that sound, but then puts a real dark spin on it. If you listen to the second Man on the Moon, the tracks on here are incredibly dark, from the first one all the way up to the last track. So this album is really it's a gateway into Cudi's mind at the time, and the stuff that he discusses on here is also, thematically interesting, as of course coming from a bling era of hip hop in the 2000s, where money and drugs and women were seen as like this glory, and were so seen as like the end goal. And we have tracks on The Legend of Mr. Rager, like Marijuana, where he's talking about the bad sides of marijuana, not just being like, hell yeah, weed, let's go, which at the time was like the go-to thing when you talked about weed in hip-hop. So this is my favorite Cudi project, just because I think it is the most personal to him, and that is why it's at the number one spot right here. But I could also see the first one being up there with it, but we'll see how we go from here. Then let's get into it. I'll take the Wizard Project, because the Wizard Project is something that I love. I love the single Teleport to Me, which was also the most successful single off of this. Teleport to Me was one of the first Cudi songs that I really got into, that I really listened to a lot. One of the first ones I heard too. That's why that song will always be special to me. But the project as a whole, I can remember some highlights like High Off Life, or, well, I kind of like Where Did You Sleep Last Night is a weird, almost cringy Cudi singing track, but I did kind of like it for the same reasons that I like a lot of Cudi stuff, which is him just trying different things, even if he's not, even if he hasn't perfected that sound yet. But the rest of the project was just pretty unforgettable to me. I believe the production on here was really good though by Dot, which kind of crosses over hip hop and rock, which is a mixture that we haven't seen done successfully on like a commercial scale, or at least as a genre developing on a commercial scale so far. And I think that's one of the most interesting crossovers and genres that there is. And it really takes like a special artist to make a great record with it, which I didn't think in this case Cudi did, but he was one of those first ones back in 2012 that hopped on that train, even if he wasn't, of course, the initial pioneer or visionary that envisioned that crossover. But he did a pretty good job on hopping onto it pretty early and kind of recognizing that. Then this is going to be tough, honestly. We have A Kid Named Cudi, a mixtape that I really like. I think, of course, it had his breakout hit Day and Night, which was also featured on his first album, but it was initially on A Kid Named Cudi. We have tracks on here like Man on the Moon, which was, I think that was also in the deluxe edition, or like the bonus tracks on his first album, but it really comes from the first mixtape. I liked it. I really liked the mixtape. I haven't listened to it as much as his studio albums, just because the studio albums are more easily accessible. I have them on Spotify on my phone. Of course, I have the Dat Piff app and listen to A Kid Named Cudi, but I don't do that as often as I click on Spotify. So that's why this project I haven't listened to as much as the others, but I've listened to it all the way through many times, and I like it. The sound, it kind of goes hand in hand with his first studio album. His first studio album, Man on the Moon, was just the world realizing that, hey, this is Cudi with this new type of sound, but he actually brought this sound to life with the mixtape A Kid Named Cudi. And this was also the mixtape that Kanye discovered him through and flew him out to Hawaii to work on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And also 808s. I think that was also, because A Kid Named Cudi came out in 2008. I believe, and that's when Kanye was also working on 808s, and where Cudi, of course, has the hook on Welcome to Heartbreak, one of his best works to date, of course, and a very important stepping stone in his career early on. Getting co-signed by Kanye is a big thing. All right, so I'm going to put this in the B category. Now we kind of have something for every category. I'm going to put the first Man on the Moon in the S category, though, just to like make this clear. Let's do Kitsy Ghost. One of, I think it was in 2018, one of the only, I think, 2 or 3 records that Anthony Fantano from the Needle Drop gave a 10 out of 10. And it's a project that I had to warm up to, because I didn't initially found the sound to be easily accessible, because it is more experimental. You could definitely call it experimental hip-hop, but up from the second listen and now many, many listens after it, this is definitely a great piece of art, and I think it really brought out the best from Kanye and Cudi both. It's a perfect symbiosis of the two, with Cudi, taking charge of like more of the hook and the melodic type of stuff, and Kanye then being on the production and dropping verses too. I think the features on here are very well picked and placed. I think the song structures on here are very ambitious, as they don't usually follow the like traditional song or songwriting structures, and the album just beautifully is kind of like a door into the minds of the creators of it. So that's why I think it's definitely one of Cudi's best projects. Even if it is a collaboration with Kanye, it's still in this list, as it is as much a Cudi album as it is a Kanye album. And I'm not sure if I would put it on the S spot, just because it's only 2 years old. And I don't think that's always a criteria for why to put something lower, just because it hasn't stood the test of time. But in this case, I feel bad putting it above these 2 now legendary Cudi records. So that's why I'm going to put it at the A spot. I would pick Passion, Pain, and Demon Slaying next. The comeback after Speeding Bullet to Heaven, which was, as I said earlier, critically received not very well. And Passion, Pain, and Demon Slaying was kind of a coming back to form for Cudi. He went into a lot of his older styles on here. He brought back a lot of songwriting structure ideas that he had in the past, a lot of melodic elements that he got famous for. But the project is just too long. It's if it had like 10 tracks, it would be very enjoyable, as all of the tracks don't really, most of them at least, follow a narrative. They are mostly just vibes. I feel that kind of feels stupid to say, but they really are. They're an instrumental that Cudi is kind of performing these vocal acrobatics over, or at least trying to match the vibe of the instrumental with his voice as an instrument, which is really something he's great at, but not for 1.5 hours. Highlights on here, of course, one of my favorite, also the songs that got me back into Cudi when it came out was Swim in the Light. I think it has a very wavy instrumental, and I think Cudi's voice perfectly fits over it. It's really just a vibe. If you haven't listened to it, listen to Swim in the Light. It's incredibly good. And I think that song, it even spans over 4 minutes, but in that case, it really fits. It's fine that it's so long. Baptized in Fire with Travis Scott is also very cool, which was kind of the start of their relationship, after Travis, of course, is a huge Cudi fan. And I also dropped a video on what I expect from their collaboration project that's coming out sometime this year. I'm going to leave a link to click on for you right here. But all in all, it just wasn't focused enough to really be considered one of his best works. It's definitely somewhere in this lower tier. I don't think it's as good as A Kid Named Cudi. I would put it in C probably. I think it's on par with Wizard, which is kind of like the same idea that there are standout tracks on it, but just all in all, it's not nothing exciting that you would listen to from top to bottom, which I think, for example, all of these 3 are. Next up, I would pick Satellite Flight, Journey to Mother Moon. Many people also think this is kind of like it kind of went downward after Indica that he dropped this one. But there are definitely highlights on here, and I think it's also really cool to see how Cudi continued this concept of the man on the moon and the journey to the moon in this case, of course, all throughout his first, 3 to 4 records. I think Balmain Jeans is one of his best tracks, even though the lyrics on there are kind of cringy. But the vibe of it and the way what Cudi does with his voice on there is incredible. When he first comes in, like the first verse, or the first hook, it's just, I get goosebumps every time I listen to it. I think Too Bad I Have to Destroy You is also another highlight in the track list, as it is also just this epic build-up and instrumental that when the first time I listened to it, it felt like I just like transcended into another dimension, and that's what I like to get from Cudi music. So this is also, maybe it's in the C, maybe it's in the B, although I would put it in the C category, as it just hasn't proven to be as influential over the years in his discography as some other stuff. Now, getting into Indica, the last project, I will put this in B, because I think a lot of people hate on Indica, but the first half of the album is incredible, I think. We have stuff like Just What I Am, which is one of his biggest hits and one of his best songs. We have King Wizard, Immortal. All these tracks are, to me, I listen to them still to this day. And this is also the album where Cudi took charge of most of the production, which is also really cool to see. But I have to admit, the second half, starting probably, not even second half, more than the second half, starting with Girls, probably the track Girls, which is also just very corny and just uncomfortable to listen to. I think starting from there, it kind of spirals downward, just becoming more and more forgettable. I don't really remember the last couple of tracks on the record. Of course I do, but they've just been pushed back in my mind so much over the years because they're just not relevant to me. So I think this is a pretty good tier list. I'm actually pretty I'm fine with this. Like, this looks pretty good. We have my favorite albums at the top, then Kitsy Ghost, then we have A Kid Named Cudi and Indica, then like the kind of like projects that are in his discography but don't really bring much value to it, and then we have Speeding Bullet to Heaven, which we don't have to get into why that is not a good album, as I already did in the beginning of the video. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. Let me know what y'all's tier lists are. Let me know if you're a Cudi fan, what you kind of associate with every project, because that is also a very personal question for Cudi fans, as Cudi has touched so many lives over the course of his career. And yeah, I'll leave the link to it in the description if y'all want to go also create a tier list, and I'll be happy to hear from y'all. If you watched this video to the end and liked it, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe, turn on notifications, hit that like button, and in the description is the links to my social media and my blog if you want to go check it out, which I really appreciate and helps me out a lot. That being said, until the next one, you'll have an amazing day.